A handsome black rancher helped a millionaire fix her broken tractor. It was supposed to end right there, a simple favor between neighbors. But it didn't. That simple act became the beginning of something neither of them had expected, and neither of them was ready for how deeply it would change their lives. In a world where money often speaks louder than character, and where kindness is usually followed by a price tag, what happens when two people from completely different worlds collide in the middle of a quiet Georgia field? This is the story of pride, reputation, gossip, and a love built not on wealth but on respect. The sun had barely risen over rural Georgia when Anthony drove his dusty pickup down the narrow road separating his land from Greenfield Farm. At 34, he had spent the last decade building his 80-acre ranch from nothing. No inheritance, no shortcuts, just sweat, discipline, and 18-hour workdays. That morning, he had cattle to feed and fences to repair. But as he rounded the bend near the property line, something made him slow down. A red tractor sat dead in the middle of a golden wheat field. Beside it stood a woman, pacing, frustrated, phone lifted high in the air, searching for a signal that didn't exist. Anthony almost kept driving. He didn't have time for someone else's problems. But his mother hadn't raised him to ignore someone stranded, so he pulled over. The woman turned at the sound of his truck door. Blonde hair tied back, denim shirt smudged with dirt. Not the kind of city girl playing farmer he expected. She looked like she actually worked the land. "Need some help?" he called out. She hesitated, her eyes cautious. "My tractor chose the worst possible morning to die," she said, "and I've got 20 acres that need harvesting before tomorrow's rain." Anthony climbed up, checked under the hood, and quickly spotted the problem. Blown hydraulic line, clutch bearing on its last breath. "I can fix it," he said. "About an hour." "How much?" she asked immediately. He didn't answer that question. Instead, he grabbed his tools. "For now, you've got wheat that needs saving." An hour and 15 minutes later, the tractor roared back to life. She stared at him like she didn't quite know what to say. "I'm Kate," she finally said, extending her hand. "I own Greenfield." Anthony paused. He'd heard of Greenfield Farm, multi-million-dollar operation, organic contracts across the state. He shook her hand anyway. "Anthony, Lone Oak Ranch." When she insisted on paying him, he refused. "We're neighbors," he said simply. "That's how it works." And he drove away. But Kate didn't forget him. Since inheriting Greenfield from her late father, she'd dealt with consultants, investors, contractors, all polite, all calculating. Everyone wanted something. Anthony had wanted nothing. 3 days later, she found herself driving past his ranch, then again the next day. Finally, she showed up at his gate with a basket of fresh vegetables, telling herself it was just gratitude. They shared coffee on his porch. Strong, black, no fancy cups, just chipped mugs and honest conversation. She learned he'd saved every dollar from construction and oil rig jobs to buy that land at 24. Built it piece by piece. He learned she had given up a corporate agricultural career to save her father's farm when he got sick and turned it into something even bigger after he passed. They were different, but they understood work and sacrifice. Over the next month, Kate found reasons to visit. Equipment advice, extra food, casual tours of her greenhouses. Anthony was always respectful. always distant. He had heard the whispers in town. People assumed he was trying to secure a future by getting close to a wealthy farm owner. His pride wouldn't allow that. Then the storm came. Violent winds tore through both properties, destroying a long stretch of fencing along their shared boundary. Anthony showed up within 20 minutes. They worked side by side in mud and rain, digging posts, stretching wire, muscles burning. It wasn't glamorous, it was exhausting. But it felt real. Sitting on his truck's tailgate afterward, Kate finally asked the question, "Why do you keep your distance?" Anthony didn't sugarcoat it. "People think I am after your money." Kate's jaw tightened. She'd spent 2 years fighting off men who actually were. "You've never asked me for a single thing," she said. "Not once." Before he could respond, her phone rang. Another crisis. Her main harvester had broken down. Repair companies were booked for weeks. If crops weren't collected immediately, she'd lose a massive portion of her yield. Anthony stood up without hesitation. "Let's go look at it." For 3 straight days, he worked on that machine, sunrise to after dark, checking on his cattle in between, sleeping barely a few hours. On the 3rd night, the engine finally roared back to life. Kate didn't think, she just hugged him. And this time, he didn't pull away. "Why?" she whispered. "After everything you said about pride and distance?" Anthony looked at her. "Because independence doesn't have to mean being alone." She admitted she was scared too. Every relationship since inheriting the farm had been about access, money, leverage. "I don't need someone to match my bank account," she said. "I need someone who treats me like an equal." They made rules that night. No handouts. No investment. No rescuing each other. 2 separate businesses. 2 independent people. 1 partnership built on respect. The gossip didn't stop. Feed store whispers, raised eyebrows. But Anthony expanded his ranch the right way, securing his own loan, growing his herd on merit. Kate introduced him to buyers, not as charity, but as business equals. 6 months later, they stood again beside that same red tractor where it all began. The wheat field was quiet, golden in the sunset. "That breakdown," Kate said softly, "felt like the worst timing in my life." Anthony smiled. Funny how the worst days sometimes lead to the best things. They had built something rare, not dependency, not transaction, not convenience, but respect. And in a world obsessed with status and numbers, that was worth more than all the farmland in Georgia. Sometimes love doesn't start with fireworks. Sometimes it starts with a broken machine, a simple act of kindness, and someone who expects nothing in return. If you believe real connection is built on character, not money, make sure you subscribe. Because the next story might just change the way you see the world.